Welcome to another Thursday night Bible study, brought to you as a ministry of SIGBC.
So today we are going to begin the contemplation of gentleness. Now, we've been talking about bearing fruit for Christ, and for a while now we've been on the subject of the fruit of the Spirit, being the fruit that God expects us to bear for Christ. And we've been talking about the various aspects of the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so today we're going to be contemplating gentleness. Now, we have one word, gentleness. And when we think of the word gentleness, we think of someone who is mild-mannered, soft-spoken, not very harsh, not very rash, someone who is known for kindness and quietness. Well, those same concepts are actually behind the word gentleness in the Greek. And but there are actually more words for gentleness that encompass gentleness in the Greek than there are in English. So we've been looking at the fruit of the Spirit passage, but if we read Colossians chapter 3 verses 12 through 14, which is very similar to the fruit of the Spirit passage in its list, we read, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves." And so he means choose to put on, choose to wear, like you'd wake up in the morning and look at your closet or your drawers and decide what outfits you're going to wear for the day. And then you deliberately, once you've chosen it, you put it on. He says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with." And he lists a number of things that we are to daily decide to clothe ourselves with. He says, clothe yourselves with compassion, clothe yourselves with kindness, clothe yourselves with humility, clothe yourselves with gentleness and patience. And if we do these things, if we choose to be patient and be kind and be humble and be compassionate, then that will enable us to bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you, and for all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Now, the word that is used here for gentleness is the Greek word Christotes. And Christotes has with it the connotation of usefulness, that is, moral excellence, or a demeanor that is based on the choice for excellence, or character that is known for excellence. It is obviously translated gentleness as well, but can be translated goodness or kindness. So these concepts go hand in hand when it comes to being kind, compassionate, forgiving, and gentle. There is the idea of benignity, that is, from which we get, of course, the word benign, which is not actively hostile, or kindness, or even our church motto for this year, walk in integrity. This word, Christotes, can actually be translated integrity. In other words, we are who we are because we've decided to be that person And the person that we've decided to be is one who bears fruit for Christ. And it affects not just who we are, not just how we think, not just how we feel, but what we do in life. And so Philippians chapter 4, verse 5, Paul says, "Let your gentleness be evident to all, the Lord is near." In other words, you should be famous for your gentle spirit. Now, of course, the Greek word for gentleness here is translated in the King James moderation. Let your moderation be known. But the Greek word is epikes, which has to do with appropriateness of conduct and attitude. So, by implication, of course, it means to be mild or to be gentle, to practice moderation, and also carries with it the connotation of patience and being equitable, being fair, being mild. And so we should be famous for our mild nature, our gentle spirit, our moderation, our patience, our desire to be equitable, fair, and mild. Now, recently there has been a lot of talk about the subject of toxic masculinity. And within the concept of toxic masculinity, there is the tendency to physical violence. And especially those who are of the bar culture. I was just reading an article recently about this, where especially those of the bar culture, evidently it is part of that culture to become verbally hostile and even to break out into fist fights among men for whatever reason. Now, the anger doesn't usually last. I'm assuming it's because the hostility was primarily due to the influence of alcohol. But there is an idea that the masculine is more tendency-wise prone to violence or prone to hostility. And while that may be true, testosterone and all, that men have more of a tendency to hostility and violence, that doesn't mean that we have to be. In the martial arts culture, people who are really, really good at martial arts never have to use it, because they know that were they to be attacked, they could easily fend off their attacker. And so they choose other means of communicating to achieve peace through gentleness. I remember years ago the story, and I've told this story in the past, long ago, but I remember when I first came to Japan, reading in the newspaper an article that was written by a foreigner who lived in Japan, and he had, since coming to Japan, taken up martial arts. And so he decided that he wanted to know how to defend himself and maybe to defend others. And he was on a train one day, and there was a drunk person who boarded the train, and they were obviously agitated, very angry and hostile. And so the person that got on the train drunk started pushing people and yelling at people and telling them to get out of the way. And so this young foreigner who had been practicing martial arts decided, maybe it's time for me to use my martial arts. And so just as he was about to get up, he said, a man who was sitting down, an elderly man who was sitting down in the corner, he said, "Hey, what's going on?" And the drunk guy hesitated because the guy was acting like he knew him. And he says, "Come on over here, come on over here. Here, come sit with me." And so the drunk guy, he's like, so he came over and he sat down. And the old man's like, "So what's been happening with you?" And it took the drunk guy by surprise. And he started telling about how his wife had left him and he had lost his job and he had no hope, and he had gone out and got drunk and was emotionally hostile. And the young foreigner who was telling this story, who was writing the article, said he learned a very important lesson in life through the Japanese culture. And that is, even if you know how to defeat someone, gentleness is the preferred choice for every human interaction. And that comes from the Bible. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Finally, in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2 and 3, we read, "Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace." You see, it's difficult for us to maintain peace. Even among Christians, sometimes it's difficult for us to maintain a spirit of unity and peace. What helps to maintain a spirit of unity and peace is the decision to be gentle. And so that's why Paul said to the Ephesians, be completely humble. And if we are able to be humble, then we can be gentle. And if we are able to be gentle, then choose to be gentle, then we can be patient. And we can bear with one another even in times where others are hostile or express hostility toward us. We don't need to get emotional. We don't need to get upset, because the fruit of the Spirit is gentleness. So make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace by being gentle. This particular word, gentle, is a third Greek word, proutes. And it has to do with mildness or meekness, or, again, the same word is used before gentle, but humble. So within the meaning of the word proutes is the concept of humility that results in a quiet, calm, collected spirit. So the fruit of the Spirit, gentleness. We'll talk more about this next week. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for listening. You can also join us in person or live on Facebook every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Japan time. This has been a ministry of Sakahogi International Grace Baptist Church.